Aftermath, a Sunderside's fanfiction reading, written and read by Love Living My Dreams. Chapter 3, A Journey of 1,000 Miles. Janice returned to his room, feeling pretty good about today. Progress! Finally he'd been listened to. It felt great. Sure, he would have preferred if it hadn't ended with Roman sinking out the way he did, or Logan shouting at Patton. Virgil wouldn't believe him if he said it wasn't his intent. But it really wasn't. Logan and Patton would probably patch things up. Hopefully. So that left the heartbroken prince. Somehow he'd have to apologize to Roman and convince him that Thomas's opinion of him hadn't changed. The ego feeling self-conscious could be devastating to Thomas' mental health. It would make the breakthroughs of today irrelevant. He wasn't actually concerned about the flamboyant side, and he didn't care that his past action had apparently done more damage than he'd anticipated. No, this was about what it could do to Thomas, and the fact that if Virgil thought he'd broken the prince, Janus would never get his little shadow chaser back. He looked in his mirror, hyping himself up. He could do this. Virgil would have to learn to work with him around again, whether he liked it or not. At the very least for Thomas's sake. If Virgil worried about his presence in Thomas's mind, he wouldn't be able to focus on the dangers in the real world, and if Virgil tolerated him for long enough, he might remember on his own that their past wasn't all bad. He just has to lay the groundwork and be patient. Not his strong suit, he prefers finding shortcuts, but those won't work with Virgil. Not after last time. So no tricks. No impersonating his friends to influence him, no lies. Sincerity and patience. Thomas was worth it. Virgil was worth it. And who knows, maybe Virgil had a point and he'd find that the others were worth it too. This shouldn't be too hard. He'd go and apologize right away. Virgil would probably get a kick out of hearing him say, "You were right, I was wrong." It was a rare thing for Janice to admit a mistake, much less to apologize for it. "So, how did it go?" Remus asked. Janice turned around and found a mustached, green-clad man lounging on his couch and snacking on deodorant. That was a new repulsive trait of his since Virgil corrected him on his flavor comment. Janice isn't exactly a fan, but Remus wasn't going to stop if he asked. He never did, so he elected to just pretend like it was normal. That was the most likely way to get him to lose interest in the activity. "As well as I could have hoped, I suppose," Janice offered as he wondered if he should maybe change his clothes to look less threatening. Virgil picked a new look when he got accepted, or maybe that would put Virgil even more on edge. He'd probably see it as a ploy to manipulate him somehow. He chuckled for a moment as he thought back to the house discussion that had led to that wardrobe change for Virgil and the others. Wasn't it ironic that he of all cited the color scheme associated with Thomas's beloved house, the one known for its honest, loyal members? Well, he had loyalty then. At least, he thought so. Virgil might disagree. "You're in?" Remus asked, disbelieving, pulling Janice out of his thoughts. "I am," he confirmed as he nodded to himself. Everything would turn out fine. Patton and Thomas were on board. Logan never had any true opposition to engaging in debates with him, and Virgil and Roman would follow the others in their decision. They might be reluctant to do so, but they would come around eventually. Virgil was right. That wasn't as hard as he thought it would be. Now he only had to say that to the cautious side's face. Just being aggressive doesn't work. Thomas and the others respond better to a gentle hand. "I'm afraid that my past attempts have already done some damage that will be hard to overcome. But in time..." Janice felt a smile tug at his lips as he thought of that. "We'll really be allowed to go back?" Remus mused, strangely vulnerable. Remus missed his brother, no matter what he told you, and Janice knew enough of lying to know that Roman missed Remus too. He had simply convinced himself that he didn't. In the end, Roman would be grateful. Janice just hoped that the worst of that process was now behind them, and not ahead. He turned to the repressed creativity and nodded. Thomas would be able to be honest with himself and accept the necessity to think of himself every once in a while. He'd be able to open up to a wider variety of ideas. Sure, most of Remus' ideas would still be shut down, but he'd be able to appreciate John's humor more. He'd be able to take a risk. Even his acting would improve if he allowed his mind to go to darker places. In the end, everyone would be happier. It would have saved him a lot of time if Janice had listened to Virgil instead of being possessive and selfish. Ironic. He, who was trying to teach Thomas to be more selfish, had to learn to be more selfless in order to actually get his way. A scoff came from the window and made both sides tense as they glanced over at the figure, who was staring into the subconscious outside the room. "Something you'd like to say?" he asked carefully. It would take a lot of work before he was ready to even mention him to the others. He wasn't sure if he wanted to draw Thomas's attention to him in the first place. Not yet, anyway. "You're both crazy. Your brother fears you, Remus. He fears being erased," he sneered, making Remus recoil. The king was a sensitive subject to everyone. "And Janus doesn't really care about it anyway. He just wants his storm cloud back. Have you gone soft for the little one, Jan? Or is it one of those other weaklings who's caught your fancy?" he mused, still not looking back. "Sunny as always," Janus offered before turning to Remus to see if he was doing all right. He wasn't. Clearly, the words had struck something deep within the dark side of creativity, even if Remus pretended to be more fascinated by the beating human heart he'd summoned. He'd comfort Remus later. "None of that concerns you. It's not like you'll be joining us anyway. You've made that perfectly clear." He knows it's a lie. One their fellow dark side, as Roman had dubbed them, had almost convinced himself of. It's easier to say that you don't want to be accepted than to face the possibility of rejection. Janus should know. "It will take time," Janus admitted with a sigh. "But if Thomas can fully accept Virgil, and Patton can willingly turn to me for advice, then Roman can admit that he misses Remus." And this Janus truly believed. He could see that Remus smiled a little at that. "Whatever," the other side scoffed before disappearing to his own room. Remus and Janus let out a sigh of relief. The dark sides always stuck together, but he'd always been purposefully difficult to live with. "He's not gonna ruin everything, is he? 'Cause that's my thing," Remus joked half-heartedly. Janus sighed. "No, not if Thomas is mindful of self-care like he promised. He didn't remember you until he was vulnerable to your presence, so as long as he isn't open to him, we have time to prepare. If we stand together, we'll be able to handle him for as long as he insists on being a problem." Janus wasn't sure how much of that was a lie. He hoped none of it was. "That's good. What are you gonna do now?" Remus asked curiously. Janus sighed. "The hardest part. Apologize to Virgil and pray that he'll forgive me." "Well, good luck with that!" Remus chuckled as he disappeared too. Janus had to agree with the unspoken. "He will need it." Well, postponing it any further wouldn't make it any easier. His eye fell on the small piece of fabric on his bedside table. Maybe it would be easier if he went to him with something of his to return. He picked it up and smoothed out the crease, tracing the crudely stitched silver spiderweb. It had been Virgil's comfort item ever since he moved in, a gift from Janus to make him feel welcome and safe with them. He'd been so small, heartbroken, and scared. Well, the middle bit was partly Janus's fault, and that is why they are in this mess. Janus remembered the last thing Virgil had said to him before turning his back on them for good. "I hate you. I never want to see your face again. Stay away from us." It had hurt, not because it was a lie, not because it was the truth, but because it was both. If Virgil had meant every word, Janus would have been able to work with it. Hate and love are close together. Janus would have been able to work his way back to the positive side of that, and then everything would be fine. If Virgil had been lying, then Janus would have been able to call him out on it, and that would have been that. But because Virgil had lied about his feelings but been honest about his desire, Janus had been heartbroken, and by the time he recovered he'd been kicked out and denied access to Virgil's room. A side could lock his room to specific sides. Roman, Logan, Patton, and now Virgil too, allowed each other to travel freely between their rooms. Janice had only ever been allowed to enter Logan's room unhindered, and even that privilege he'd lost after he impersonated Patton. He readjusted his hat once last time, as he let himself hope for a moment that he would be let in tonight. He wondered if it had changed since last time he was there. He tucked away the fabric, and with another deep breath that did little to nothing to calm his nerves, he appeared in front of the dark wooden door that had various keep out signs on it, even a hand-crafted one that read, "If you can't let yourself in, I don't want you anywhere near me. Ouch." Well, too bad, because he won't leave until he has at least delivered some kind of apology. He knocked on the door. "Virgil?" he started, trying to go for smooth, but he couldn't. He was too worked up to put up a front, not to mention that he was terrified of how any form of deceit would be received. "I understand that you are still mad at me, but as you might know, I'm going to be hanging around from now on. We should at least try to be civil with one another. Just give me a minute, that's all I need. Then we might come to some sort of agreement that you can feel comfortable with." He waited with bated breath for a response that wasn't coming. Okay, he hadn't really expected that to work. "I swear I'm coming in peace, Virgil. Just talk to me. You don't have to open the door. Just let me know that you are listening." Still nothing. Janice became nervous. He knew that he had to be patient, but it was hard when part of him had been aching to be within arm's reach of the young man he'd cared for most of their lives, since they had that fight. "If this is about Roman, I'm really sorry. I'm going to apologize to him too, once Patton is done comforting. I know you'll find it hard to believe, but I never intended today to be so hurtful. I know I should have learned my lesson by now. But I needed them to see reason. I know that doesn't make what I did to your friends right. I've wreaked havoc on the light sides every time you've seen me since you joined them. I acted like a villain, a real villain, and it will take a lot of work to fix what I did. But a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, right? Let me take this step, Virgil. Let me say sorry for what I did to you." Nothing. All of that, and he didn't even feel a shift in energy behind the door. He remembered Virgil would sometimes try to drown out the world. Had he been trying to disappear in the sound ever since they left the wedding? No, he would have felt Janice's presence at the door. He had to be ignoring him on purpose. Storm shy? He tried. Surely the old endearment would at least get some reaction. Virgil always pretended to hate it and made a big deal about how it didn't fit his vibe. And yet today, nothing. "V, do you want me to beg? Because I will," he warned, his voice shaky with emotion. And it was the truth. He would go down on his knees and plead with him for hours if that was what it would take to get a reaction, any kind of acknowledgement that he existed. "He's not in there." Janice looked up to find Patton had caught him close to breaking. No, he wasn't ready for any of the others to see him in this kind of state. How long had he been standing there? "Oh, Patton, I figured you'd be with Prince Charming still," he muttered, not wanting to acknowledge what the heart had just witnessed. Patton nodded a little sheepishly, allowing Janice to pretend he still had his dignity. "Me too, but Virgil was looking after him already." Oh no. That meant that Virgil already knew everything, except he heard it from a side who would have nothing positive to say about his actions today. Great. Just great. "I'm on my way to Logan's. Take a rest, Jen. You earned it. Virgil's probably going to stick with Roman as long as he feels he's in danger." Virgil thought he was a danger to his new friends. He'd never be able to talk to him in private now. He should have gone straight to Virgil. Then again, Virgil might have gone straight to Roman upon sensing his distress. He probably never stood a chance at reconciling with Virgil tonight. Why did he think it would be that easy? He looked to the door that held his old friend's sanctuary, wishing that it wasn't close to him. Oh, well, Perhaps it's better if he gets used to the idea a bit first, anyway. Right, because Virgil was sure to warm up to him after hearing how Janus had torn the prince down to make a point. Sure, his praises for Roman's strength and sacrifice had been sincere, but that didn't help the pain he'd caused by spelling out how wasted that effort had been. Did he really have to dig himself in deeper today? I'm sure it'll all pan out, Button offered, clearly noticing Janus was slowly losing hope. Roman and Virgil had a falling out that lasted close to 2 decades, and now they're almost back to old times. Button had a point. If Virgil was looking after Roman right now, then they'd come a long way from their semi-war of wit. Whatever happened between the two is going to sort itself out as well. Janus wished he could be as optimistic as the pun-loving man, but until they knew what damage he was working with, he couldn't. But to appease his paternal colleague, he nodded and gave him a little wave before turning around. Good luck with Logan, he offered as he wondered how long he'd have to wait for another chance. When he heard the door close and looked back, he found that he was alone in the hallway again. Suddenly, an idea struck him. One Patton would surely disapprove of. What he was about to do couldn't turn out well. At best, he'd heard things he didn't want to know, but wouldn't be able to forget. At the worst, he'd be caught and find himself fighting with Virgil. Again, only an idiot would risk provoking Virgil when he was in protector mode. And apparently he was an idiot, because he soon found himself at the colorfully decorated white wooden door to Roman's room. Closely. Sound was different in the room. Technically, all voices were equally loud wherever you stand. The rooms provide a little dampening, but someone would only have to concentrate and be able to follow the conversation. Janus could have listened from his room, but that would take much more focus and might draw Virgil's attention to his presence more than if he stood close by. This was a bad idea. This was cheating. He should go to his room and work out what he'd say to Virgil tomorrow. He was about to do just that, but then he realized he could hear crying. Roman? I don't understand what I did wrong. It was definitely Roman sobbing. They might all have the same face and voice, but at the same time they all looked and sounded different. Enough to be recognizable. Why am I the bad guy in this? The performer's voice pleaded with Virgil. Didn't I do the right thing? Going to the wedding? Janus didn't feel guilty over the way the normally boisterous side suddenly sounded so fragile, small, and scared. He didn't feel responsible for the man question his role in life, and if he felt bad, then it was just because it could be dangerous for Thomas if Roman went down the path his thoughts were turning to. It was a good thing he decided to listen in. Now he knew to keep an eye on Roman, give him opportunity to be the hero again, to reignite his passion. I just wanted to do the right thing. Thomas counted on me to give him hope. Hope. Another thing Roman represented they couldn't afford to lose. Why had Janus gambled with him of all sides? If there was one side you didn't want to make a fool out of, to rise above the challenge and defy that serpent's scheme despite the odds. He remembered the uncomfortable look Roman when he started to feel bad about lying to a friend, pleading with who he thought was a trusted friend to put an end to the performance. Then the uncertain look on Roman's face turning to devastation during the trial. He'd done that. He had used Roman to try and get himself noticed. Roman had been willing to give him a second chance, and he'd made him feel horrible for doing so. It was not where Janus had wanted the trial to go. He'd wanted Thomas to feel comfortable, to prioritize himself for once. He'd failed to look around and see that everyone was miserable because of him. He shouldn't have gloated like a Disney villain. He should have taken that moment to be sincere, to ease Thomas and everyone else's feelings about the situation, show that he wasn't evil. But other than a brief feeling of victory, I've never felt worse. I mean, Remus got the better of me for the first time in ages. Encouraging Remus to go nuts hadn't been a great idea either. He'd known that Logan would be able to show the Duke wasn't evil. The analogy of a child with a tantrum was accurate. just a neglected side who was going all out with the playtime he'd been offered. And in the end, Janice hoped that Thomas would learn that even his disturbing thoughts didn't make him evil as a person, that even his most disturbing side wasn't a malicious individual. And then Virgil and Patton would lay off on Thomas. They would be more open to Janice when he tried again. It worked, for Patton at least. But was it worth the near hysteric sobbing he heard from the prince now? He might not have been impersonated, but he ended up the sacrificed pawn in every move Janice had made, manipulated twice and overpowered the third time. Of course he wasn't willing to give Janice influence him this time around. It's not right! Why do I feel like I'm being punished for doing what we knew was right? Well, Janice is being celebrated. Janice was wrong, wasn't he? Janice was reminded of a younger Virgil crying himself to sleep because he thought Thomas hated him. It felt wrong to hear Roman sound equally scared and desperate for words of comfort. You did good, Ro. Janice barely managed to hold back a gasp as he heard Virgil speak. He hadn't heard him sound so gentle and unguarded in age. Even when he played Patton, Virgil had been distant and cold towards him. Since he was suspicious of him the whole time, he hadn't offered him a single kind word or friendly smile. He'd just been trying to confirm his suspicion. It probably would comfort Thomas to realize that even his deceptive side was a very poor liar. Because Thomas wasn't that great at it. Acting, no problem. Lying to people's faces? Rubbish. Thomas was too nice. And that was why all the sides loved him and wanted to protect him. It was more than just self-preservation. But we all knew that we felt conflicted about it when we left the door. We were all on edge, and from the sound of it, you weren't at fault in the escalation of the conflict. It was so odd. Virgil was being such a strange combination of firm and gentle. Janice knew that he sincerely cared about his bantering part. The two argued almost all the time. It was their nature. Virgil was in charge of the looking, where Roman was the one who leapt. Often they had the same destination. It was the road they rarely agreed on. Janice had seen that Roman was a lot more mindful of hurting Virgil's feelings during those arguments later, and that Virgil cared about Roman's well-being. It was out of fear for Roman's well-being that Virgil had actively blocked Roman out of Thomas's thoughts once he sensed the Duke's presence that night. And it was for his sake that he'd been so frantic in forgetting the visit had ever happened in the first place. Virgil cared about the others. Janice knew this, of course. He'd known for years. Even when Virgil swore that he only tolerated them because Thomas needed. But Janice hadn't let himself believe it until now. Patton is the one who wasn't honest with himself out of fear to disappoint Thomas, and Janice was the one to push him to the edge. He was surprised that Virgil sounded so calm at the last part. He didn't sound angry. Could it be that Virgil was willing to give him a chance? And it was Janice who hurt you in the past and didn't bother to apologize or acknowledge it had ever happened. Of course you were on edge around him, but that's just how he is. Virgil sounded resigned to that fact. It made Janice determined to prove him wrong. He'd been planning to apologize to both Virgil and Roman, and he would. He'd earn the trust of every one of the other sides. What happened? Roman asked after a few moments of silence. You said that Janice was a big part of the reason you thought you were bad or something. When Janice heard that, he vanished to his own room, not wanting to risk making a sound. He didn't want to listen to that, but as he dropped onto his couch, his mind drifted back. In Janice's defense, he had been lonely at the time. His only fellow outcast hadn't been the greatest conversationalist. When fear started to manifest, he'd found the signs endearing. They were all exactly the same size back then, but fear always seemed smaller somehow. And he was shy, unlike the rest of them. That triggered some protective instinct. He was born because Patton was getting trouble dealing with all of Thomas's emotions, especially the ones dealing with fear. since their charge could get very overwhelmed by the pressures of the outside world, and so a separate identity formed around all his worries and insecurities. The trickster had half expected fear to be sent to him the second he was formed. He existed because the moral compass couldn't handle these duties after all. Why wouldn't he assume that the resulting side would be rejected? But Patton felt attached to the new being from his own turmoil. And the king, well, he didn't mind having an addition to his audience, and the challenge in both entertaining and comforting the new inhabitant of Thomas's mind. Logan found that Fear was a proper student, unlike the king and Hart, who both lacked the attention span to listen to him for a long time. Like he said, young Fear triggered a certain protective instinct his fellow sides. Perhaps it had been selfish of Janus to be upset about Fear being taken in by the others. He didn't truly wish for the boy to be cast out on his first day, but he'd been convinced that sooner or later he would be deemed unwanted, and then it would hurt more if he got attached to the others. Then the king split, and it only took a few months for Remus to be pushed away. Yet Virgil remained. Janus hadn't liked to tear the twins apart the way he had, but it had taken him about 1 second of seeing the white-clad creativity to know that he would not allow his brother to leave unless he was forced. Remus was a little scared at first of the sudden move, and unsure of why he couldn't go play with Roman and Fear anymore. Soon, however, he came to enjoy the fact that he could do whatever he wanted without being scolded, or at least not the way Patton would. Janus let him do whatever as long as it wasn't too loud or didn't cause too much of a mess. He wasn't as lonely, but still he envied Patton. He kept a closer eye on the other sides, making sure that Roman could handle the task he shared with his brother on his own, and in doing so he saw the way Fear held on to Patton, how he looked to the others with wide pleading eyes, looking for assurance and guidance. Was it terrible that he wanted that? And he saw how Roman struggled with the absence of his brother, how it affected his behavior. The prince still tried to be a good friend to the, but he hid his pain and fears behind a mask of confidence, and occasionally he lashed out. He witnessed as one such occasion resulted in Fear panicking, and the other two sides scolding him, while Roman tried to get their attention and explain that it was actually his fault. But Fear already ran off. He kept going until he was in no man's land. Janus had acted with little thought, not wanting the voices of Fear's friends to carry over. He could sense Roman's sincere desire to fix everything, his courage in admitting his mistake. If Fear happened to hear any of that, this opportunity would last forever.
"What are you doing so far out?"
He'd wonder gently as he approached a disoriented and distraught Fear being curled on the ground, pushing down an oncoming panic attack. Roman would probably liken the scenery to when Snow White finds herself in the middle of the dark forest, except there were no cute woodland critters that approached the young protector. It was the half-serpent guardian of the boy looked up and scrambled away back towards the main chambers. "I know who you are," he exclaimed in warning as he got up. The action might seem terrified, but the 12-year-old's voice was surprisingly strong and his eyes stood fierce. He wasn't trying to escape. He was putting some distance between them so he had time to fight back should an attack come. Fear was brave. "You are the one who took Remus. You are deceit," the boy told him in an accusatory tone.
"Let me guess. Patton told you all about me?"
he asked smoothly, cocking his head curiously as he observed the boy. "Yes, and I won't let you get Thomas in trouble. You'll have to go through me," he insisted. "Of course you won't. You keep Thomas safe after all." "As do I," Janus stated simply. Fear frowned confused. You do?" "But of course. Thomas didn't like the thoughts Remus gave him, did he?" he offered. "Well, no, I guess not." Fear flinched, looking guilty for saying something like that about his friend's hard work. "It's all right. It's just the world we live in. Some things about Thomas are best kept hidden away. At least, if we want Thomas to have friends, if we want his parents to be proud, if we want him to be safe." He took a step forward, testing the waters. Fear stepped back, shaking his head. No, you are playing tricks on me, so I'll help you. I won't betray Roman and Logan and Patton. And they would do the same for you, wouldn't they? They'd stand by you with unwavering trust and loyalty. They are your friends, after all. Janice nodded. Pain that flashed over Fear's face almost made Janice back off. Almost. I haven't introduced myself. Patton calls me the seat with my real name.
If I can trust you with it.
Fear looked back towards the main room hesitantly before turning, still apprehensive, and nodding. Janice, he finished. Fear nodded and gave him an awkward wave. Fear, he said quietly. I don't have a real name yet. Janice had been surprised to hear a lie. Had Fear been holding a secret? It's all right if you don't want to tell me yet, but there's no point in lying to me, Janice informed him. Fear's eyes flashed wide and he took a step back. Why though? Why lie in the first place? Janice wondered. Is it perhaps because deep down you fear that hearing your name might be the final piece that will
Push them away,
Janice guessed, and he could see that he hit a sensitive spot for the boy. For a second he paled, and then he darkened. His eyes changed, grew pitch black. He hissed in warning and crouched as if ready to attack. I'm sorry, Janice allowed sincerely. Your reasons are yours, but you shouldn't be so worried for the
approval of people who see you as a problem to be solved.
You aren't the problem, Fear. You are the solution. And it was there that Janice got the boy hooked. While the caution didn't leave his eyes, he drank in every word Janice said after that. He even let him inch closer and closer as he spoke. The outside is full of dangers. Real ones, like traffic and burglars. But tricky ones, like losing friends and angering family too. You are the one who protects us from both. The others don't see that. Patton made you, and even he thinks you need to be fixed, while you're exactly the way you should be. Janice came to stand right in front of him, his face reassuring. Fear shook his head, trying to deny what Janice was saying, but it's exactly what he thought. At least sometimes, when he'd had a bad day, and something one of the others said stuck with him. See? Nothing to be afraid of. Oh, kiddo, you shouldn't worry so much. We've got it all under control. Fear is not for the noble knights of the Round Table. We shall vanquish all evil, my friend. They meant well, but was that what they truly thought of him? Unnecessary, exaggerated, unwanted? They tried to dismiss you, brush you off. Janice pressed on. But what if you see something really important and they ignore you? You can't let that happen, because if you do, Thomas will ignore you and get hurt. I know. I won't let it happen, Fear insisted. But will the others let you take the lead when it's needed? Janice asked before holding out a hand. I don't wait for permission from Patton to do anything. And I can teach you to take charge as well, if you are up for it. The younger side almost reached for the offered hand, but hesitated. Tell you what, just come and have a look. If you still think I'm evil, then you just run right back and tell the others. Sounds good? Fear had nodded and followed him. Scaredy cat! Remus exclaimed as he tackled Fear to the ground. Remus! Fear gasped. That's me! The chaotic boy giggled excitedly. What are you doing here? He asked. Suddenly a determined look came over Fear's face. I'm here to bring you back. Rome misses you. That was unexpected. But Janice was not worried. Remus giggled and booped his young friend's nose. That's sweet, darling. But I have to stay here. Thomas has a barrier that keeps me from going back up. It's all right, though. I get to go really crazy down here, he grinned. Jen says there is no point denying who we are down here. It's awesome, Remus told him as he finally got off Virgil and gestured around before flopping down on the floor. I'm good here, Squirt. I don't have to feel bad about me being me and getting Thomas in trouble down here. So, he wasn't mean? Fear asked carefully. Of course not, Remus exclaimed shocked. We're outcasts. We look after one another. He grinned before running off to his room, yelling about a perfectly gross idea. See? Janice grinned as he sat down in the spot Luce left behind. I don't know what Patton said about me, but I'm not that bad, am I? Janice offered. You'd really help me to protect Thomas? Fear asked carefully. Just Fear, that's all I want. We're born to do, Janice promised. For an instant, Fear stared at him. All right. I'll stay a while, but the second I smell something fishy, I'm out of here," the younger side insisted. "Of course, you can leave whenever you want, and I promise I'll make sure that you'll never be ignored." Fear smiled and nodded, reaching out to shake Janice's hand. "Thanks." Virgil had enjoyed his stay with them. Very soon they had their own dynamic. Remus and Virgil had plenty of play fights. Janice usually was the one to keep things from getting out of hand. Very soon Virgil had a preteen attitude with him, but in a loving way. Janice was elated. He and Virgil had long conversations about the flaws of society and laughed at each other's particular brands of humor. Before the week was over, Virgil revealed his name to them. Janice sighed wistfully as he remembered those times. Surely Virgil remembered the good bits. "JD, come see!" Before Janice could really register that Remus had appeared on his lap, they were in Remus' room instead. Still on the couch, still in a position that made Janice throw his friend to the ground, which didn't bother Duke in the least. But yeah, we're in the rather... Well, let's not dwell too much on what that room is like. We'd all like to be able to sleep tonight and keep our appetite intact. "What?" Janice exclaimed, still a little shocked at the sudden, everything. Remus was giggling as he got up and sat next to Janice on the couch. "You know that me and Bowman's room are connected, right?" He giggled, on the verge of hysterical laughter it seemed. "Yes?" Janice said slowly. "Well, whenever I'm bored, I check in with Bobo, and sometimes I make up funny things for him to say. My favorite is when he and the resident gloom expert have their movie nights. It's great to make voices for them and make up what they're saying to each other, or narrate their thoughts." Janice nodded. He didn't need to know what exactly those conversations were about. "So I wanted to check in tonight, and look what I saw!" Remus was now full on laughing as he pointed at the screen. "From the looks of it, they're being really mushy," Remus exclaimed, as Janice took in the way Bowman and Virgil sat as close together as they could without actually being in one another's laps, their bodies indicating that they were comfortable with one another despite the heavy subject they were undoubtedly discussing. Virgil was blushing, and Roman had an odd smile on his face. "If they can go from mortal enemies to this, then sure we can warm up to the both of us too, right?" Remus offered hopefully. Yeah, I'm sure he can," Janice agreed as he focused on what was being said. Their expressions turned heavy. "Face again. And I've been pissed ever since," he heard Virgil tell. He didn't need to wonder what they were talking about. The day everything went. "Virgil, come on. We're having fantasy pizza. Come out." Desperately knocking at the youngest one's door. He knew it. He knew that engaging with Thomas directly would lead to this. Why had he let Virgil indulge in this hobby of his? Why had it been so important for him to mess with the others out in the open? Because a few fenders liked him? Maybe he just needed to give Virgil some time? Surely he'd realized that he couldn't protect Thomas from his room. Yes, that's it. Just wait a little bit. The MCR fan wouldn't last a day without making sure the door was locked. He nearly broke down the door when he heard the screaming, but he didn't. He knew it was the others. He knew Thomas was with them too. If not for him, they wouldn't have been able to get past the locked door. And so he couldn't interfere. Not unless Thomas was open to meeting. When all of them were gone, really gone, he let himself in. Virgil had finally unlocked the door. For everyone, including the sights from upstairs. He found Virgil looking at a handmade card. From Patton. That smug little... Oh, they'd have words about this later, when he gave that stupid piece of paper back on Virgil's behalf, and told him where he could shove it. "You have to be kidding me. Such saps." Janice sighed as he rolled his eyes while swiping the card from Virgil, who took a look at it. "You are Fam-I-L-Y," he read out, and then the paper was taken back. "It's a nice gesture," Virgil insisted, with an alarming kind of expression. A half smile. A real, sincere, genuine half smile. Chance panicked. He was losing him. He couldn't lose him. Not his Stormshine. "Come on, Virg. How long do you think this'll last?"
How long before the valiant prince throws a tantrum over you, reminding him that he's not being realistic and tries to banish you? How long before the calm teacher is fed up with your irrational fears and yells you straight to your room? How long before that moral pain in the neck grows tired of parenting an eternally rowdy teenager and kicks you back to the curb? He asked. Virgil just frowned. His words had no effect, and he knew why. He could feel the echoes of truth in the room. Everyone had been beyond sincere in their, and it had earned them his trust back. They won't. They never have. I ran away because I couldn't deal, but if I had tried, things could have gone different. He was trying to reach him, trying to reach out and pull him along to this new family of his. I could have been a go-between for us all, if I hadn't been so worried about making myself heard and instead listened. Virgil shook his head to clear. Jan, we can do this. We can go upstairs, all of us, if we just do it the right way. By showing we care instead of forcing ourselves into the driver's seat. With time, who knows? Maybe even Remus can come back up. No, Patton would never allow that. He wouldn't let them do their jobs right. He couldn't take the risk. I should have never let you go out. Talking to Thomas has made you an idealist. I won't stand for it any longer. He should have reasoned with Verge. Told him that Thomas didn't really want his inputs for that first video. The title alone. Jay, if you just... Virgil started with pleading eyes. I won't let them do this. They don't get to take you away now. Janice ceded. Only after he said it he realized that he'd just given himself away. Virgil's reaching hand fell to his side, and his expression fell to a blank stare. Janice could see him put pieces together. No. Of course. It was a broken sound. There was something that almost sounded like a laugh, but not a happy one. You were playing me this whole time, like a little puppet on strings. You manipulated me. This was some kind of game to you. You never cared. You just wanted to take something from Patton. Virgil accused him. That's not true, Janice insisted. It wasn't. He was jealous, yes, but he took Virgil in because he wanted to be his friend, one who could truly understand him. I do care, and I don't want to cause Patton pain. That's not my purpose. I aim to make choices he can't make when they are necessary, but I'd never purposefully hurt any part of Thomas. Why then? Why pull the strings so I never reconnected with Roman, Patton, or Logan again? Virgil demanded. I did what I thought was needed, he insisted, unable to admit that he was just really, really lonely, and he had decided that Virgil would benefit from being with him more than he would from being with sides that would handle him like he was made of glass half the time. Virgil's eyes were stone cold. So he admitted then. You did lie. Janice wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. He couldn't bring himself to lie to his face now. It wouldn't work anyway. Virgil knew him too well. Virgil, please, he cried out, not sure what to say to undo the damage that had just been wrought. So what now? I suppose you expect me to spy on the others for you? Was that why you let me get close to them? So you could use me to corrupt Thomas? The words stung. Virgil really thought he was evil? After all this time. How much had he hurt him for him to lose nearly 20 years of trust just like that? No, I swear. I promised you could leave whenever you wanted. I was just trying to keep that promise. Good, Virgil snapped. So let me go. Stormshine. Janet's voice cracked as he reached out, his eyes pleading and tears almost escaping him. Virgil stepped back and looked away, his makeup running with angry tears. Let me go, and stay away from me and from my friends, especially from Thomas. You only hurt him. That's a lie, Janice protested. Is it? Virgil snapped, looking back furiously. Who had him convinced he was straight? Kept all of us from showing him that he very much wasn't. That was a low blow. Thomas didn't want to know at the time. He wasn't ready. I was just doing my job. And making everyone, including me and Remus, miserable. I was wrong. You can't be allowed upstairs. You never change. I hate you. I never want to see your face again. Stay away from us." And before he knew it, he was outside the door. He disappeared from the basement. "No, I'm going to tease Ro about this when we get upstairs. I'll torture him by being the biggest personality skipper ever. I'll decorate his room with fan art, read fics out loud. It's gonna be great." Remus giggled next to him, pulling Janice back to the present where Roman had pulled Virgil into a hug. Janice listened to what was said instead of the inappropriate proposal Remus dubbed in a weird imitation of his brother's voice. "Want me to stab him for you?" "Because I would totally stab him for you." Considering how sincere he sounded, Janice made a note to watch his back. He was used to being maimed by Remus, but it wasn't pleasant. Virgil chuckled as he hugged the prince back, an action that was received with incredulous screeching from the Duke. "Virgil never hugs!" he exclaimed. Janice nodded in agreement, more interested in how comfortable Virgil was. Maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe the upstairs would have helped Virgil thrive in ways he hadn't anticipated. Just then their surroundings changed, and just like Roman and Virgil, Janice and Remus found themselves sitting on the bed in Thomas's bedroom. Virgil got up but was pulled back down by Roman, the creative side looking panicked at the prospect of his friends leaving. Janice flinched. His fault. He watched them exchange words, ignoring Remus, making suggestive comments, eating it all up. When their sleeper manifested, Roman's face turned vulnerable in a way even Remus couldn't make fun of. "What did you do to my brother? I've never seen him like that," Remus wondered. Sad, but not accusatory. "I underestimated the impact of my actions," Janice admitted, as he watched how Virgil pulled Roman close as they got under the cover, Roman curling up against his side and resting his head over his heart. And then they saw how Virgil started to sing Roman to sleep. "We should go to bed too," Janice sighed. "Tomorrow would be a hard day." "Yeah, Nord and Prude are in the dream room, so I won't get to have fun there." "Might as well," Remus shrugged. "Good night, Snack Boy," he waved. "Night, Disaster Man," Janice replied, before disappearing to his room and getting into bed. He settled in and listened to Virgil's voice. He would make it up to him somehow. Starting tomorrow. He took out a piece of fabric and held it close.